coming up on the Outside of Sunday podcast. I don't know how familiar you are with like OnlyFans and like pornography and all of that, but was your mind blown?
It was. It was such a good. It was such a good open door, especially for a mom, for me to be thinking, because I didn't know about OnlyFans. That was new to me.
You didn't?
No.
Okay. But the first time that I ever was exposed to pornography, I was living in Newcastle, New South Wales in Australia. I was on a bus. So random. I was on a bus and I happened to have my Bluetooth turned on.
So I was at a sleepover at a friend's house who had a big brother who was watching porn in his room with the door open. When a kid comes to you and has been exposed to pornography, you want to be that safe place, and you don't want to control with fear and with shame.
This is something that I try and think about when, in terms of parenting, how God would respond to us when we come to sin. If my child comes to me and tells me that they've sinned, how am I going to respond to that? I want to respond the way that my Father in heaven would respond when I come to him. Hey, you're listening to the Outside of Sunday podcast. Is your faith stuck on Sunday? Christianity was never meant to be constrained to a weekly church service. I'm Christa, and here you'll find discussions on the Bible, mum life, and of course, how to live your faith outside of Sunday. Welcome back to the Outside of Sunday podcast. I'm Christa, and I'm here with Julie from Whispers of Grace, and we're going to do our little post-episode chat, post-guest chat today about our awesome guest who we just had, Victoria. And was your mind blown? Like, I don't know how familiar you are with like OnlyFans and like pornography and all of that, but was your mind blown?
It was such a good, it was such a good open door, especially for a mom, for me to be thinking, because I didn't know about OnlyFans. That was new to me.
You didn't?
No.
Okay.
I've been seeing it like on t-shirts and stuff, but I just never knew what it was.
Wow.
I was like, cool.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I'm a little older. Like I was like, oh, I think I'm like getting past that age where I know about stuff. Because here she is like talking about it commonly, and I was like, I don't know.
If you were on TikTok, you would know about it, because a whole heap of those girls, like she even said, are on TikTok. And that's kind of almost like a recruitment tool for OnlyFans.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. I've limited exposure there. But thinking about the challenges that our kids face now, like when I grew up, I didn't have a cell phone until like the end of high school. I didn't have a phone in my pocket where I could access like naked photos, you know?
Yeah.
Like pornography was still on VHS tapes.
Yeah, yeah.
So it was like, if people were going to be exposed to it, it was a lot harder, you know, for that to happen. But now, like hearing the stats of kids that are exposed to pornography, I think she said like 8 and 9-year-olds.
Yes.
Yeah, it's just incredible and sad. And I love that you shared about the book, Good Pictures, Bad Pictures, because I think
that book.
Yes.
So much.
Giving your kids that understanding from when they're little that there will be things that you shouldn't put your eyes on. And that's so biblical, you know, and Jesus talking about filling your mind with good things, think on things that are lovely and beautiful and gentle and praiseworthy, you know, and taking every thought captive. Like these are all biblical thoughts that we're just putting into simple terms for our kids.
Yes.
Because walking into that pornography is just like, it's walking into a bee's nest. It's like you're going to get stung.
For me, I didn't get a cell phone until I was 16. And it was a flip one, and you could hardly do anything on it. I mean, we had computers, but it was one computer that you had to use in front of like the living room, and we couldn't use it unless like everyone was around. So it wasn't like we even could look it up. But the first time that I ever was exposed to pornography, I was living in Newcastle, New South Wales in Australia. I was on a bus. So random. I was on a bus and I happened to have my Bluetooth turned on. I was in my 20s. And then I got a thing saying someone wants to send you a message. And I'd never received that before. And I was like, what's this? And I don't know how, but I clicked okay, because I was like, what is this? I don't understand. I was thinking someone wants to message me. And then it was literally pornography. Someone just sent me like this video of pornography. And I was like, what on earth? Like, I'm in a bus and this person is on the bus with me as well. And like, I mean, they must just do that, like to troll people in real life of, here you go, look at this disgusting thing. And I was like, like as soon as I saw it, I was like, delete, get it off my phone. But that's kind of was my first exposure to pornography. What about you? Do you want to share that?
Sure. Yeah. So like I said, VHS tapes, right? So I was at a sleepover at a friend's house who had a big brother who was watching porn in his room with the door open. So it was one of those, like, we walked by and I was like, what? Went back and I was like, what is even happening?
How old were you?
Oh, high school.
High school.
I was probably a sophomore, maybe.
I don't know what that means.
Oh.
Like, I hear people say that on TV. And I'm like, I don't know what a sophomore is.
Oh my goodness, that's
You're
so
in
good.
New Zealand.
I know, I'm in New Zealand.
Can I get the tissues, baby, please?
You're in New Zealand. Okay, sorry. Don't say sophomore.
Well, I know it has something to do with like the year that you're in, but
Yeah.
I like no other context.
Yeah, so sophomore
I'm
year.
crying.
Sophomore year is year 10.
Okay.
So I was like, I probably was like 15.
Okay, so sophomore is like year 10. Yeah.
Yes,
So you're
yeah.
doing 14 or something.
Yeah,
15.
14, 15. And it was one of those like walk by situations that it was like, what is happening? But I think for me, I was not immediately like, that's gross. I was like, what's that? I think for me, it was more engaging. And I was just like, that's like, I want to do that, you know, and it pulled me in. And so I think remembering all the way back then, I think it's important to realize like a lot of your kids are going to people, adults, anyone, God made us to be sexual beings. Like he created sex, he created intimacy, and it's a good thing. Like sex is wonderful. God created it in marriage to bring people together.
Yeah.
You know, to share intimacy, to create deeper bonds, to bring healing. Like sex is a wonderful, beautiful thing. And I think that's why we're drawn to it, because we are created for it.
Yeah.
But it has parameters. Like God has sent boundaries up around it for it to be safe and wonderful. And if you take it outside the boundaries, it's a lot like Victoria was sharing the story about the fire in the fireplace.
Yeah.
Like if you keep the fire in the fireplace, it warms the home and it's beautiful and it's a good thing. But if it's out on your carpet, it's going to burn your house down.
Yeah,
So it's
absolutely.
that. It's like, this is a good thing that God's created, but it has to be handled well for it to be good. So I think it took me, again, growing up in a Christian home and being at purity seminars where you're told as a youth, like, no, don't think about it, don't do it, it's bad, don't touch it, like go, like walk around it, cross the street, which is good advice.
Yeah.
Because we don't want to awaken love before it's time.
Yeah.
God says that in his
Yeah.
word for a reason. It's important to realize that. But at the same time, I think it's also important for kids to understand that sex is good and it just has to have the right parameters, because that's another, like a whole bunch of church kids that grow up in this purity culture, then they grow up and get married and like don't know what to do with themselves and have issues with intimacy because they're told like don't, it's bad for so long.
Yeah.
And then it's like, then the door swings open and it's like, no, good. You should serve your husband, go, like be sexually active. And you're like, wait, what?
And then you feel guilt, like, oh, I feel weird. Like, should I even be doing this?
And what's okay and what's not okay, and like, can we do this and should we, or like what?
Yeah.
You just feel so confused and not really like discipled in it. Like who tells us these things? What are we supposed to do? You know? And I just think as I'm raising my kids, I have teenagers, you know, that are growing up. I'm trying to give them the balance of like, sex is good and healthy and wonderful, but premarital sex will hurt you. It will leave you broken and in pain and outside of God's plan, which is not where you want to be.
Yeah.
But I think specifically bringing it back to pornography, the statistics tell us that children will be exposed to pornography. Like it's going to happen. You can't live your life outside of it. So we try and avoid for our kids to be involved as long as we can. But once it does happen, once they are exposed, I think you have a moment. It's actually an opportunity.
Yeah.
It's a really beautiful time. And I think I've actually been listening to podcasts on this recently.
Oh, great.
Like trying to like kind of source out some more material. And I think the number one thing that I have gleaned is kindness. Is your kids need to be handled with kindness, which is the opposite of shame.
Yeah. When I think previous generations, the generations before this, like maybe your parents, my parents, and most listeners' parents, you know, when you did something wrong, it was like met with anger. You know, you got a growling and it was like shame. And my parents were wonderful. So I'm not trying to bang on my parents at all. They were great. But it was kind of, that was the feel that you kind of got, was that, oh, I'm in trouble, bad, that's not good, rather than having a conversation. And even like sharing, like this is something that I was just talking to some of my friends about, is that the previous generation, they weren't really very open, and like people wouldn't share. And I'm not judging the previous generation, because I think, you know, I am so blessed to have the parents that I did, and they had it harder than I did. You know, it's kind of like this tier that, you know, their parents before them probably had it harder, and their parents before them probably had it harder, and like we just getting it down. But yeah, so being able to talk about it in a way that is open and positive. I don't know if you want to share, but I don't mind sharing. My son was 9 years old when my husband had the talk with him about sex, we've been talking about to our kids about pornography since they were really little, because of that Good Pictures, Bad Pictures book. So he already knew what pornography was, but this was like the proper talk, and he went at it. I wasn't in the room because I was like, no, this is father son, you know, I'll leave that. But when I was talking to my husband about it later, he was like, yeah, I just started off by saying, you know, like, this is this wonderful gift. Like, this is this plan that God has for us. This is how babies are made. And isn't that amazing? And all of those things. And I was just like, yay, like, I'm so glad. Because I remember when my mum had the sex talk with me, and I was so embarrassed. I was like, oh, you know, like, don't talk to me. But my son, because he was 9, maybe it was the age thing, I don't know, but he was so like curious, and he even said at one point, oh no, that's gross, like, I don't want to hear about that. But it wasn't like a uncomfortable thing, it was a very open thing. And like I said, pornography as a point of discussion for our family is super open. I talk about it around our 4-year-old, you know, not in a gross way, but just in a, this is what it is, and we have those resources which we use all the time.
Yeah, actually, so a book that I introduced to my kids really young is called God Made All of Me. It's by Justin and Lindsay Holcomb.
Oh, cool.
And it essentially talks about how to, like, good touches and bad touches, and like how to keep your body safe, and that it's okay to say no if you don't even want to hug somebody. And all about that, like body awareness and where your lines are, which that was something I was very passionate about, because I had a lot of friends growing up, and still do, that experienced a lot of sexual abuse when they were little because they just didn't know. So for me, that book was really essential because it was an easy way to introduce them to the idea that you have autonomy over your body, like you're in charge of your body, you know? But having the sex talk, it's funny, I've heard that 100 2-minute conversations is better than one 100-minute conversation. So it's those little bits. You kind of keep sowing the seeds, and you keep them age appropriate as they get older,
definitely.
you know, with telling them a little bit more and a little bit more. And as they get curious, you know, and ask questions, you want to be their source of information.
Yes.
You don't want them to go to Google or go to their friends who know equally as much as they do.
Yes.
You know, you want to be able to give them good information. So I think being open and not being awkward yourself is super important, and being able to say vagina and penis and without a snicker in your voice. It's like they need to know that they can use these proper anatomical terms to explain things that are happening. And if you're weird, they're going to be awkward about it too.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the other thing too. Like I mentioned, and some people might think it's too young, I mentioned that it was 9 years old where we had like a proper talk. He was asking. He wanted to know. And like you said about the 100 tiny conversations, you know, we would have those they would ask us questions and we would give little answers. But this was like the proper, let's get to the bottom of this. And it's very important, I think, that we are the source of information for our children, that we are like the perceived experts in their mind, because if we're not willing to answer these questions, and if we're like, oh, well, let's not talk about that, you know, like they're going to go to their friends, they're going to go to Google, they're going to ask Siri when you're not looking, you know, like on your phone. So we need to be the ones who are, yes, engaging with the conversations, as you said, so great, without shame. And just, let their curiosity be your guide as well, I suppose,
Yeah, and I think the other thing that we maybe do and don't think about is be like, oh, well, that's just naughty, or oh, we don't do that, or we don't talk about that's bad. And we give these really negative terms easily to the thoughts that they bring up instead of being like, oh, well, it's just not the time for that, or that's inappropriate for your age, or just kind of using different words instead of being like bad, naughty, wrong, like no. Just understand, no, not bad, not like, you know, like, especially if anybody's had a little boy, like they're
Yes.
very aware of
They're
their
extremely-
man parts real
Yeah.
quick. And if you shame them about
No.
it, then they start to feel shameful about their body instead of being like, yep, that's your body, but you're not going to touch those parts when everyone else is around. Like, here, that's just not for you to do, you know? Instead of being like, bad, don't, like, oh,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
So I think it's the kind of the attitude that we bring to the table too. And again, like when a kid comes to you and has been exposed to pornography, you want to be that safe place, and you don't want to control with fear and with shame. Because again, I think Christian culture, we try and push kids so far the other way, and it's just not done the right way. Because fear is not a tool of God. It's a tool of
that's right.
Satan. And shame is also a tool of Satan. So when we use fear and shame, if you have sex, you're going to get pregnant. Like that's fear mongering.
But also, like, the other thing too is like getting pregnant is like a miracle, you know, like that's amazing. And so now we're saying, oh, that's a bad thing. And so you're framing that already like, oh, okay, that's a bad thing. I mean, obviously we know that, you know, having it within the bounds of marriage is the design that God had. But if my daughter came to me and said, Mom, I've been in a relationship that was sexual and now I'm pregnant, I wouldn't be like, I can't believe you're pregnant. Like, what is wrong with you? I mean, I would embrace her and I would be like, there's a baby. Like, let's just set aside the fact that, yes, of course you shouldn't be doing that. But like, there's a baby. God has created life. Like, this is amazing. I don't know. How do you feel that, like, is that an appropriate reaction?
No,
or is
same. I think like you come to me and tell me you're pregnant, like I'm going to weep, like instantly weep and just be like, what? Like,
Yeah.
Sure. Out of context, you made a mistake, but like there is life, like
Yeah.
God has done. And you know what? Seriously, it's not like there's no coming back from having a baby. Like that's why God made families, you
Yes.
know? And if you look even in the family of God, like there is a prostitute, Rahab is in the lineage
Yes.
of Jesus.
Yes.
Like there's so many people in the Bible that made big, huge mistakes. Look at King David, who the Bible says was a man after God's own heart. God continually references him as this amazing man. He committed adultery and murder.
and murder?
Yeah, but if he was here today, like Christians would cancel him and be like, nothing from King David anymore. Like, did you hear what he did? I
know.
And it's just so sad because God is so good and forgiving. And like we said, like brings beauty from ashes. But why can't we do that with our own kids
Yeah.
when they make mistakes? Like, and not shame them and like drive them away with fear. Like, kids need to know, if you do have sex, you could get pregnant. And do you really want to get pregnant when you're 16 or 17?
All right, let's just hold that thought for a moment. If you're enjoying this episode of the podcast, please make sure you like, subscribe, leave us a comment and a 5-star review. Now back to the episode.
The thing is, like, even if you are 15 or 16 and you get pregnant, even if he doesn't stick with you, God will still use
Yes,
it. And it can
that's
still be
right.
beautiful and good. Like, you have a life.
Yeah.
Your life looks different now, but God is good and he's still going to take care of you. It's not like everything's over. I got pregnant.
Yeah.
You know, like, not
And that's
that at
the
all.
thing, like, and showing them that you were there for them, because this is something that I try and think about when, in terms of parenting, is what you were saying before, like how God would respond to us when we come to sin, like when we sin, sorry. So if my child comes to me and tells me that they've sinned, how am I going to respond to that? I want to respond the way that my Father in heaven would respond when I come to him. And so I obviously am perfect, but I do try to keep that in mind because, we are representing Christ to our children as well. And so we want to show them, I love you no matter what. I'm not going to break relationship as well. The other thing too.
Yeah, it's kind of like you're the captain of this ship. And when your kid reaches out to you, they're like, I've gone overboard. And they're in the water and they're like, I've sunk. Like, I'm here, I'm off the boat. And you could either stand there with the life jacket and be like, now, should you have jumped off the boat? You should have known better. You should have put the life jacket on. You know, we've talked to, like, not that all of those things are wrong. Like, yes, they should have conviction, but they are going to make mistakes. They're going to jump off the boat.
Yeah.
So you have the opportunity to throw them the life raft and be like, oh no, you've fallen off the boat. Let me pull you back in and embrace you and put a blanket around your shoulders and love you. And then let's talk about, like, how could we do this better next time?
Yeah.
You know?
That's great.
The verse that comes to mind is that no temptation has overtaken you except that which is common to man.
Yeah.
And with that temptation, God will provide a way of escape. So if you're tempted, God knows that. And the temptation that you're facing is not unique to you. God provides a way of escape. So there's a way to escape it. And I think there's a lot of people that are stuck in pornography addiction that are desperately trying to hide it because they are embarrassed. And I think that if we can kind of break the stigma more of that, especially in the Christian community, where, like, let's be honest, we're all big time sinners. And if you want to point at somebody else and be like, oh, you're addicted to porn, like that means you're not saved. No, it means you're a fleshly fallen human that's stuck in an addiction. Reach out and get help. Don't stay stuck. Please do not stay alone, struggling, with your phone in a dark corner. Like, you're going to keep falling. You have to do wise things to put hedges in place so that you can heal. You need accountability. You need people that you can talk to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you have to pull on the family of God if you're going to break those things. And you know what? The beautiful thing is when you see one or two people brave enough to stand up and say, this is something that I'm struggling with, so many other people start to crop up. And all of a sudden they're like, how did you do it? How did you escape? How did you, conquer this thing in your life? And to be honest about the fact that, yeah, I still get tempted. Temptation is still real. It's around every corner. There's a billboard of a naked woman that I want to look at again and again and again. Like it's real. It's there. And I think if we can be honest about it, that's the key to healing. Because again, shame and fear wants to shove things under the carpet and hide it. But God wants us to expose things to the light so they can be healed. So there's just like a resource also that I was thinking about with pornography. It's specifically geared towards men that are stuck in pornography addiction. It's called the Conqueror series, and it's all about how to quit porn. And it examines like the neurochemistry of addiction, and it gives you weapons and strategies to quit and proven strategies to prevent relapse. So I'm sure we can link that in the show notes, but that's an incredible DVD series that we own and we have lent out to lots of different people and shared. And it's like, this is a really good resource to have if you're stuck.
That's so great.
Yeah.
So great. And I think something else that can help, just like right now, you could put this into your life if you're someone who's struggling. And it could be a woman, men and women both can struggle with this. But if you are someone who is struggling, maybe like this would help. Having the thought of who that person is in that content. That person is also someone who is created in the image of God, somebody that God loves and somebody that God wants to see saved and brought into the right relationship with him. And that might be something that might help. Just a tip to start. But absolutely, please get help, get those resources, and
Yeah, and I think just along with what you were saying, something that Victoria was mentioning is that with this new age of pornography, people are just seen as commodity.
Yeah.
It's kind of like sex is bought and sold, and women and girls especially, and men as well, are seen as commodity. Like they've there's dollar signs over their heads.
Yeah.
It
made me so sad when she was saying that there's no stigma really for OnlyFans. I'm not sure if it's like this in New Zealand or if it's just specific to Australia, but like there's no stigma for being someone who makes money off of girls doing porn. And I was like, it's almost like, it's like sex work, and you want to get into that because it's making a lot of money. It's not making a lot of money. I mean, yes, it is, but it's these women who are like degrading themselves. Like, I just feel like, man.
Yeah, I can see the argument that it's empowering because you're in charge. Like I can see that side of it. But at the same time, do you really want to be turned into a product?
Yeah.
Like that is like you go into the dairy and you look at all the things on the shelf and you're just one of those things, because God has created you for so much more, so much more than just what you can give. And the thing is, like, you age out of that pretty quick. Like, how fast is it that people really don't want to see your body anymore? Or you have a husband and your life changes and he doesn't want people to see your body. Like, even if you're fully developed in that world and you're all for it, not a Christian and kind of like waving the flag, like, it's not going to last very long. And then you're always going to be looking back to the glory days, when your boobs were more firm, before you nursed a baby and before you had stretch marks, or before you got older and got gray in your hair and people didn't want to see you anymore. And then what does your life look like? Like, how empowered do you feel now that nobody wants to see you? That's terrible to think that there will be a point when you're now rejected solely based on your physical appearance.
Yeah. And those women are worth so much more than that. Like, to even be like, I mean, I mentioned this briefly in the chat, like, to be hot is so cheap. It doesn't take much to be hot. Just show your boobs, show your butt, like, show all that stuff. And that's hot. Beauty is so much, like, there is so much more substance to beauty than hotness. Hotness is so cheap. And I think these women are beautiful women who are just, yeah. But something that I didn't actually get to talk to Victoria about, but I've seen her share on her Instagram account, which is the average monthly earnings that these OnlyFans girls are making. So you see the people who are making like 6 figures a month or like, you know, $1 million a year or whatever. But the average woman who is putting those pictures and those videos up on OnlyFans is earning $180 a month.
Oh, that's
doesn't
so
that just break your heart? Like,
that's like a couple hours at Macca's.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, go to Macca's.
Yeah.
Let's move on now, because there's something that I wanted to bring up, just launching off of what Victoria had said. So she had been saved, she got baptized, and then she was at like this crossroads of what does the Lord want me to do? And she went into a period of fasting. So I wanted to talk about fasting for a little bit, because what I really love about what she shared is that she was fasting to see what God wanted her to do. And I think a problem that I've seen in my own life and perhaps in the wider church community is fasting for God to do what you want God to do, rather than God's will to be done. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think if you go into a really good fast, you can't hold on to what you want to do for very long.
Like, her fast was intense. Like, she was like no food, and then it was no coffee, and then it was not even water. Like,
I know,
she was committed. I was like, this girl. Like,
yes. I think that's important. And I think that maybe as a community, we've lost the heart of what a fast really is meant to even be. Like, why would you do that? Mm-hmm. So the simplest little tagline that I love about fasting that helps me remember what it's for is fasting is denying something in the flesh to gain something in the spirit. And I think that's what it is. It's about putting down your fleshly needs to even to like do and to be busy. Like, when I fast, I make sure that I have time where I don't have to be doing 1,000 other things, because then I'm distracted anyway. So when I do fast, I make sure that I have carved out time to be alone with Jesus, because otherwise I'm just going to fill my time up with lots of other things.
It's tricky for moms. It's tricky for moms. Like,
Super
you
tricky.
need to, like, there's actually a monastery near here that I have a friend, and she goes there sometimes. And I'm like, that sounds amazing. Like, you can book it, and then like the nuns prepare all your meals, and like you can be alone. I was like, I am longing for that. Like, maybe one day I can go there. But for moms, like, yeah,
that's amazing.
It's a challenge.
We should do a prayer and fasting retreat. Just like, that would be so cool. I would love that. I've always wanted to do that.
Yeah.
I love that part of that, like the monastic tradition. I've been digging into that deeper because there's so much beauty in that, in the quiet stillness. Because like Victoria was saying, she needed to know what to do. She didn't know what to do, so she came before God and asked. She didn't come with her long list of, here's all the things I want you to do, Lord. And look, I'm sacrificing so much, so now you'll give it to me.
Make it happen. Grant my wish.
Right. It's not a transactional thing. Like, look, I did all these hours of like praying and fasting, and now you give me all the things I want. That's not what it's about. Fasting is about letting God transform your heart.
Yeah.
Yes. Transform your spirit, to lay down all the fleshly things, not just food, but like social media, conversations with other people, things that you have on your to-do list, a million things that we spend ourselves busy doing in this fleshly world, to actually take time to touch the spiritual, which is so much more tangible than what's actually happening, but we can't see it. So we forget about it. But fasting gives you time to really connect your spirit with God, with the Holy Spirit, to let him direct you. Yeah, that's really beautiful.
Yeah, so good. Do you have anything else that you really wanted to talk about, jumping off of Victoria's conversation?
So one of the things that Victoria said towards the end was that the die to your flesh. She kept talking about how like Christians are always talking about. I literally had that on my notes. Great. And this is one of the reasons that I love that you're interviewing these fresh believers, because again, I've been walking with the Lord for a long, long time. It's really easy to forget how easy it is in the beginning to be like, yeah, die to your flesh. Like, it's a joy. Like, because you've got that, like, the passion, and I hope it sustains for forever.
Yeah.
But that die to your flesh, it can easily become something that's legalistic, which is something that she was bringing up. And she was saying that it's kind of this legalistic thing of like, oh, I have to die, and you're this miserable sacrifice, instead of being full of joy. But I think that when we say die to your flesh, we hollow out the heart and the why. And the reason that it feels like legalism is because we forget why we're doing it. And we need to remember Jesus and the fact that he said, if you're going to look like me, if you're going to be a disciple, you need to take up your cross and follow me. Yeah. Now, at the same time of saying you have to take up your implement of death time and time again, that's going to help destroy your flesh, he also said to come to him and that his yoke was easy and his burden was light. So it's like God says, here's what the plan is. I want you to walk it. It's going to be hard. You're not going to get all the things you want. You're going to have to die to your flesh, but you're going to do it through the power of the Holy Spirit. I'm actually going to do all the work as you submit to my leadership. As you continue to submit and hand those things to me, it's going to be a joy, because now you're going to be full. And I'm going to actually do the work for you.
Yeah. Yeah. She also talked about the balance between the flesh man and the spirit man. And so I was going to bring that up with you and what you thought that was. Is that kind of connecting to that, or am I just like changing the topic?
I think it does relate. I mean, if we think about the book of Romans, this is where it talks about the flesh and the spirit. And Paul talks a lot about the old man and the flesh and the struggle. And how he even says at one point in the book of Romans, "O wretched man that I am, who will save me from this body of death?" Because he's so stuck in his flesh. But then there's a pivot point. He goes from all of this, like, I'm controlled. He says, even though I don't want to do things like pornography, I don't want to look at it, I hate it, but I keep doing it. And how he's stuck in this cycle, But then he transitions and he says, but God has killed the flesh. The old man is dead. It was buried in baptism and rose again a new life. And now I'm a spiritual man. It doesn't mean that you won't have temptations, but it means that you are no longer bound, shackled under the slavery of sin. Yeah. You are not a slave to that thing anymore, because Jesus says that you are a slave to Christ. So now you are a bondservant. You have chosen to serve Christ, to walk in the Spirit. And that is a gift. And that is the joy that we get to walk out. But yeah, I think we forget the joy. Yeah. We can forget that this is supposed to be a joy. So maybe that's a good heart check for those of us believers that are like, this isn't a joy. I don't feel like it's a joy. Why? And I think we fall into our flesh. We try and battle the flesh in the flesh, and we lose. We're like, it's not working.
Yeah. And I suppose it comes back to, whose will do we want to be done here? Do we want God's will to be done, or do we want our will to be done? My will wants to do this thing, which I know God doesn't want me to do. Can I submit that and let that go and give that to God? I mean, and then that relates even to the fasting thing. Whose will am I wanting to accomplish here? Is it thy will be done, Lord, and thy kingdom come, or my will be done and my kingdom come? So that's all really great points. Is there anything you'd like to say before I kind of close up?
Yeah, I think that the importance of remembering that, again, is the heart of Jesus. Yeah. Because I think we feel like, oh, my will is so much more fun than your will, God.
I have the best plan.
My will is so full of fun and you won't let me have any of it. And that's a lot of the perspective that the world has too, is like following God is like a bummer. But it's really not, because God, who created you, who knows you better than you know you, knows exactly what will make you most happy, what will bring you joy, lasting satisfaction. He's your maker. It's kind of like telling the creator, like, you don't know. And he's like, no, I really do. Yeah. And I think all of these things, especially pornography, it's that temporary fix. It's that temporary fix to the lust. But it always needs more. And you're a slave now, because you will crave it immediately and you'll run right back to it. Yeah. God doesn't want you to be a slave. He wants you to find lasting satisfaction that remains and is deeper and fuller. So it's not like, oh, like, come and be a Christian, your life will be misery. No, like, come and be a Christian and you will find true lasting satisfaction and joy that cannot be taken from you. Yeah. That's what Jesus brings, is life abundant and everlasting. Yeah,
and those good works that he's planned ahead of time for each of us. That's what it says in his word. He has He has a plan for you. I mean, like, I don't want people to come to Jesus for the plan. I want them to come to Jesus because of the gospel. But the bonus of that is that God has good works planned for all of us. And I think for me, even starting to do this podcast, I'm just like, this is so much fun and I love it and I'm so passionate about it. But I never thought I would be doing this. But God had a plan and I'm just so thankful for that.
Same. Like I never thought that God would have me doing this, but it is such a joy. Like I get so excited when I get to record like my podcast, your podcast, because God, the joy that he brings is in line with who he made you to be.
Yeah.
So it's like he doesn't ask everybody to sit and have a conversation because some people would be like, oh my gosh, I'm sweating just thinking about it. But that's not what he has for you. He has good things that are like perfectly appointed for who you are.
For who you are. That's right. This is our thing. So we're not saying it at all exclusively for podcasting. This gets us excited and just fills us up with joy because it's what the Lord has for us. And the Lord has something similar for you. And whatever that looks like, we don't know. The Lord knows. And
absolutely. So, and if you don't know what it is, take time to pray and to fast.
Yeah.
And hear what God has to say because he has things to say.
Yeah. Absolutely. So great. All right. Well, we're going to end it there. Thank you so much, Julie. Thanks everyone for listening to this episode of the Outside of Sunday podcast, and we'll catch you next time. Bye. Congrats, you made it to the end of this episode of the Outside of Sunday podcast. Thanks for the support. Become an official outsider by liking and subscribing and leaving a 5-star review. If you'd like to connect with the podcast, you can find me on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Just search Outside of Sunday podcast. And don't forget to let someone you know about this podcast.